Well, good morning, everyone. I'm very sorry that the elephant has gone, which I think was a great symbol, actually, of our agenda. And also, before we start, I'd just like to pay tribute to Darren Quayle for both an inspirational talk. But Darren is the person who taught me much of what I know about mining from the start. So I'm Fiona Clouder. I'm a former diplomat. And I now do consultancy on Latin America and particularly on mining, energy and environment. And if I briefly turn to my panel, if you'd just like to introduce yourselves.
Sure, thanks Fiona. So Cade, Libby, Deputy Minister of Natural Resources in the province of New Brunswick in Canada.
George Pirie. I'm the Minister of Northern Economic Development and Growth in Ontario, MPP for Timmins.
Good morning, everyone. I too am sad the elephant has left the stage, but I think we will make up for it in our presence here. My name's Rebecca Tomkinson, and it's my great privilege to be the Agent General for the Australian state of Western Australia.
Good morning. My name is Ian Morissette. I'm Associate Deputy Minister for Mines in Quebec.
Well, thank you very much to our distinguished panellists for joining us this morning. And what we're going to be talking about is really building on the government roundtable from yesterday. And so, as you may have heard from Andrew in his opening remarks, there were 66 governments represented at the roundtable yesterday, and a matching number of people from industry, from business, and from finance. And it was a very valuable set of dialogues, giving different perspectives, exchanging ideas and best practice, and covering key themes on mobilising capital and building partnerships, on innovation in a circular economy, and on the crucial thing of looking at standards in building the future of mining. And so what we want to do through this panel is to really draw on some practical examples from each of you in your governments and states, and to understand how you are really taking practical steps to drive this agenda forward. So Cade, could perhaps I start with you?
Well, great. Well, look, I'll start off by saying that I found the conversations yesterday at the Stock Exchange to be very valuable and very informative. As it relates to a provincial jurisdiction like ours in New Brunswick, we're really trying to create an environment that's positive for mining. How do we assure industry that we're open for business? And quite often, in many of the conversations that we had, not only just yesterday, but over the course of the last several months with companies and others interested in mining in New Brunswick, permitting comes up very often. In New Brunswick, we're taking positive steps to align our permitting processes, ensuring that we're rigorous but not onerous, that we have clear and timely processes. In addition to permitting, we often hear about First Nation relationships, and in New Brunswick, we really strive to have a positive relationship. We want to advise companies to have early and often engagement and offer business opportunities as well as investment and equity opportunities and projects with our First Nation communities. But Fiona, I'll be honest, there's one third aspect that has not been brought up in the last 2 days that I've been here, and it's one thing that we're certainly paying attention to in New Brunswick, and will reflect it, in fact, when we release our critical mineral strategy at PDAC this March, and that's promoting awareness. And within that bucket is public awareness. And to me, that's something not only we can do as a government, but everyone in this room could do the same. And it's mining literacy at the end of the day. And if we do it well, we're building social license. Because quite often we hear, not in my backyard, when it comes to mining operations. And we think we can actually address that, mitigate that by increasing awareness. And not only would you increase social license, but perhaps spark some interest in our young people to join the mining sector as a career later in life.
Absolutely. I'm sure we'll pick up some of those themes during our discussion.
Yeah, really and truly. I was elected about 3.5 years ago, and shortly after that I became the Minister of Mines. And my whole background is in resources, mining. Grew up in, the shadow of a headframe. Was obviously obvious to me prior to joining the government that permitting was the #1 issue. There's absolutely no way it can take 18 years to develop a mine. That's not plausible. I mean, capital is mobile. You can have the best project in the world, but if you can't permit it, then capital goes someplace else. It'll go to Quebec, New Brunswick, or Australia, or any other place that the funds can be mobilized. So the first thing we had to do was develop a new mining act, and that's what we did. We streamlined it. We got the red tape out of it. We didn't sacrifice anything from the point of view of our world-class environmental standards or the duty to consult. There's 3 provinces here, and we all have the same obligations under our Constitution vis-a-vis Indigenous relationships. In that instance, we are united in the fact that, quite frankly, nothing's going to happen without the Indigenous people's involvement. Again, it's enshrined within our consultation. Smart companies know how to do this. They'll be ahead of the game. They will be doing the consultation with the First Nations right off the bat. I was president and CEO of Plastidome Canada. I was on the ground with Plastidome when we built the Musselwhite Agreement prior to being VP of Finance or CEO of the company. We were lucky enough we had 2 really good mentors and that were involved in that process. And that's how we got that deal. We had 5 agreements with 5 signatory nations, all based on the duty to consult. So if you're smart operators, you start you start now. Even before, if it looks like it's good ground, you talk to the communities, make sure they're involved and they're looking for equity partnerships. So I've talked, and we'll pass it on to somebody else. I'll talk all day.
Rebecca.
Thanks, Fiona. The state of WA actually at the moment, its parliament is sitting, and before it is a new state development bill. So I'm also going to echo the importance of the approvals process. I'm pretty sure Ian's probably going to make a comment to that effect as well. And I think that's what came out of the government roundtable yesterday is the commonality that many of the jurisdictions are facing, and certainly that community understanding of the importance of being able to bring on board those new resources that are needed to meet the ambitions around electrification, but also to ensure that we're able to have energy security, particularly in a geopolitically challenged environment. That community support and that understanding of how much change is going to need to occur to meet those ambitions is really important. Also, you know, as Darren just said, and another shout out to Worley is a proud West Australian company that's making a great global impact, and his comments again around that permitting piece are really important. I'd also like to talk to the significance of partnership in the Australian context. Tanya Constable's here from the Minerals Council of Australia, who do incredible work in ensuring that there's a public policy advocacy for those public policy changes. And if you get a chance to talk with Tanya over the next few days, you should really do that.
Well, thank you very much, Fiona. So as you know, Canada and Quebec is a country of resources. So we have a long history in mining. At the moment in Quebec, we have 21 active mine and 50 mining projects that have at least an economic preliminary assessment. So, and there is a clear commitment by the government of Quebec to support these projects. We want them to succeed and to go under construction as soon as possible. 5 years ago, we were the first in Canada to launch a strategy to support the development of critical and strategic mineral mining project. At that time, it was a priority, but I would say that today it's more a necessity. So we have to make this happen, and we have to help companies to de-risk their projects. So we can help them by investing in the project, offer financial supports. Permitting is also an issue, even though we have reduced the delay by 30 to 40% over the last year. There's still some work to do, but as it has been said, we won't compromise on standards. So how can we streamline the process but keep at the same time our environmental standard that makes the difference, and it's an asset for us. So we are working on that. Our premier launched a new strategy 2 weeks ago, and it made it clear that the support for the mining project will be there, and we want this to happen.
So it's very encouraging, I think, to hear of the very proactive, positive support from your governments and related authorities. But one thing I'd like to probe a little more is about the urgency of this agenda. I come from the world of environmental policy. We've just seen COP30 take place in Berlin. We have really, for the first time, at least seen an interaction on mining and environment at COP. But the whole point is that to meet the challenges of this world ahead, for the energy transition, for advanced economies, also an increasing unstable world of defence and security issues, we need more minerals, we need them faster, and we need them in a very defined and quick timescale. So whilst I think what we're hearing from the Government Roundtable discussions so far is that there is a much more forward-thinking agenda on this, what practical steps are your authorities taking to ensure the momentum? And how do you keep in mind, how do you balance the kind of what's needed between what's going to be available in defined timescales? So urgency, who'd like to comment on that?
I think from an urgency point of view, it's the world has changed in the last 3.5 or 4 years. I'll talk a wee bit about social license because from my perspective, miners in Ontario or Canadian miners are the best. There's always resistance from an environmental point of view, but we don't have a mine where we don't have the discharge water is cleaner than the intake water. That's how we mine. That's how good we are. The urgency has changed, and that gives us license. The urgency has changed over the last 3.5 and 4 years because China has weaponized critical minerals and rare earths. They have, in fact, they control about 85% of the production of those minerals. They embargo them now, and without them, we're out of business. The aerospace industry is the national defense industry. That's the urgency that we have. 3.5 years ago, with the critical mineral strategy, and Quebec was the first off the bat on with that. Ontario was second, right behind them, and I think the federal government was even after that. But we were talking about the EV revolution. Now we're talking about defense. We're talking about the aerospace industry. We're talking about national defense. Some of these commodities, when they're embargoed, there's about three months of stockpile, and we're out of business. That's the urgency that we have. That's why our federal government passed Bill 5C, and that's why Ontario passed Bill 5. We have to get them out of the ground, we have to deploy them, and they have to be made ready to use. Otherwise, it's easy to say out of business, but we will be without any defense capability. The other thing that these materials control is the space industry. And if you control space and the satellites and the communications, you effectively control everything. That's where the urgency comes from. And we're all a part of it. Here today, this is the world we work with, we live in.
And if I could just build on what the Minister was saying, I think hopefully everyone's getting a good appreciation that Canada is well aware of the urgency given the current geopolitical challenges that we have around the world. And as provinces, we are really stepping up and saying, you know, we can contribute. We're open for mining opportunities. And if I'm using my own province, New Brunswick, as an example, we have a rich history in mining. But over the last several years, that has dwindled, but we have fantastic geology. So we have gold, we have antimony, we have copper, we have tungsten, among other things. And we're saying, okay, let's take a practical approach. This is now a priority for us. Our Premier has been very clear in making this a priority. And what steps can we take, working with industry, to make, you know, New Brunswick, in our case, a great jurisdiction to mine in?
I mean, you are talking to a very proud Australian and a West Australian at that, so of course I can't let slide the we are too incredibly proud of our mining capability in Australia. Obviously, as a Tier 1 mining jurisdiction, I think what's really lovely, Fiona, is the sort of sense of pride that is within the mining sector for the technological advances, the environmental restoration, the work that we have all been striving for a really long time to be able to put in place. And I think that is an important story to be contributing. Mining has changed dramatically over many decades, and no one more than the people in this room would realise that. But the technology that we're applying, for instance, Rio Tinto's new mine, Gudai-Darri in Western Australia, will be entirely automated, such as the extent of the change that's occurred in the last 10 years. And our efficiency at being able to do that extraction process and indeed that downstream processing is becoming sharper and sharper and sharper with every year. Iron ore is a big example. In the West Australian context, we ship 1 billion tonnes annually out of the Pilbara. That commodity started in the 1940s, but it didn't start at that size. It's now at that size because of the efficiency, the productivity, the capability of this sector to really build in those efficiencies. And I think that we have a lot to share with the general business community around how we have achieved some of those efficiencies. What you're also hearing from all of us in our respective jurisdiction is everyone is making changes around how we can accelerate that approvals process and how important it is for us to be able to bring those essential commodities online. We know that in our defence industry, for instance, an F-35 fighter has 25 kilos of critical minerals rare earths in it. The new submarines have 4 tonne. So it's absolutely important that we work together across those jurisdictions, using our respective strengths and some of that competitive tension that we'd like to be able to continue to showcase who we are and what we do to really achieve this together.
Yeah, I would say that a few years ago we saw mining and with the energy transition, we saw mining as an economic opportunity. But today it's an economic opportunity, but also a security issue. And we have seen some initiative at the G7 level, and I wouldn't say a wake-up call, but an awareness that we need to make this happen and we need to work together. Canada, the United States, the UK, France, and other of the alliance, and a willingness by the member countries to put in place some measure to make sure that we can build more secure supply chains. Yesterday we talked about sustainability, we can offer that. We talk about security, we offer that. We talk about resilience, we offer that. So we have all in place to make this happen. But I think if the government can just work together, it's going to be better, and we will be able to help this project for the better of the whole economy.
So in Ontario, if I can ask, we have the one permit process right now that was just released maybe about a month ago. And again, that's all about streamlining permitting. Before not that long ago, to start a mine from the Minister of Natural Resources, I think it needed 124 permits to cut a tree. Absurd. It's that type of pragmatic approach to getting stuff done that we're doing. The other thing, of course, that we're all very concerned about is energy. And look, I've worked in all around the world. The only continent I haven't worked in is Antarctica. I built mines in Quebec and Australia and New Brunswick, all over the world. And so yeah, we've got a lot of real good miners. There's no doubt about it. And what in Ontario is doing with energy, of course, we're focusing on nuclear. That's the cheapest, most reliable source of power you can have. It's clean, it's cheap. They used to produce nuclear at about 3.2 cents a kilowatt hour. I think it's a little bit higher now. We're well endowed in Canada with uranium. Cigar Lake and Cameco in Saskatchewan, unbelievable deposits of uranium. When we talk at this scale about working together, we should be talking about working together with the Western democracies. That's our challenge, working together. There's tensions, as you know, with the Western democracy right now. The challenge is we have to work together. It's imperative. It's imperative. The brightest investors around the globe are at this conference, and they're ahead of the curve on that very question.
And so you're talking about the greater awareness of the need to work together, a greater willingness to work together, but what is actually needed to translate that into action that really makes progress?
So I think, Fiona, part of it is leveraging the bilateral agreements that sit across many of the respective jurisdictions. We have demonstrated throughout history as an industry coming together with the government of the day and across different partnerships in an alliance sense to really ensure that there is the supply of the commodities that are needed in either defence applications or extended energy requirements, or sharing where other conflicts are taking place and being able to defend that. I mean, history shows how much we can work together. And particularly when it comes to critical minerals, you are seeing that it is a different type of market. So I think, to the Minister's point, the more that we can leverage the bilaterals to work together on how we see who can provide what, because in some of those commodities, if everyone tries to deliver it, none of us will succeed. And so that's what is important around this particular moment in our history, is how do we ensure that while critical, they're not necessarily big volumes involved. Some of those supply chain procurement pieces that are needed for the electrification or the technology processes that we're talking to. So we need to apply different market mechanisms in able to achieve that. You've also seen as recently as this year with the MOU announced between Australia and the US on the procurement of critical minerals. I think you're going to see other examples of that across jurisdictions. The UK here last week announced its critical minerals strategy, looking at broader partnership opportunities. You're also seeing the EU looking at doing something similar. Canada at the new conference next year will be launching a similar piece. We'll be watching with close attention to see what that looks like, so that there is that real focus on how we can leverage the existing relationships, the bilateral agreements, the free trade agreements, to accelerate the production of those critical commodities.
I want to jump in on that because your last sentence, free trade. Look, tariffs don't help. You take a look around the globe and take a look at every single commodity that's out there. Take a look at the projected demand in copper, the percentage of increase that's going to be required to fulfill our needs. Lithium, cobalt, and even the rare earths that we need, and they're produced largely because of the nuclear reactors, like whether it's hafnium or zirconium or products like that. There's a scarcity. Working together or trying to inventory them is just not going to work. And tariffs don't help.
And one dimension is about the Western nations forging alliances, sharing expertise, looking at opportunities together. The other dimension to this is actually the host countries with the resources, particularly in Africa, in Latin America, for example. How do you see partnerships building there? How do we ensure those are real partnerships, not just asset stripping by the West?
Well, I think if we come back to Rebecca's point, around bilateral agreements, is fostering collaboration. And really, it's important for us to understand what we all have to offer, but also the challenges that different jurisdictions have. And I think for those countries, using Canada as an example, that is rich in resources, we have to articulate with others about the standards that we expect and the opportunities that we see moving forward. So I think there are opportunities amongst countries to have these conversations and to develop positive relationships.
Fiona, if I can add, I think actually the really important part here is the technological application. So extraction, one thing, but the actual processing and the processing technologies really coming together to accelerate how we understand the application. China has invested for more than 20 years in refining that technology and has a real competitive advantage in the application of those processing systems. In order for us to compete, we are going to need to share what we understand together to be able to, really bring technological opportunity to bring down cost, to have higher efficiencies, to be able to ensure that not just at that extraction point, but actually investing in some common use infrastructure is also the key, with the capital infrastructure required for the processing piece. In Western Australia, we're focused on strategic industrial land areas, having in place all of the required approvals and equipment so that it can be very much plug and play. Come and build your processing plant. We've got everything in the periodic table in WA, in Australia in general. I mean, of course, I'm going to have to share that with my Canadian colleagues and, again, really just talk to the pride that we have in our industry.
And
George and then Ian. Ian then.
I think we need more collaboration on a market mechanism because when we talk about stockpiling or floor price, this kind of initiative, we cannot do it by our own, or we cannot do it alone. So, but if every country is collaborate to make sure that these kind of initiatives can be put in place, I think it's going to help to make sure that the project are successful. Right. So we need more collaboration. I wouldn't say to have another market, but market mechanism that works for our economies.
On the ground, we've got ministers, every one of us got ministers that's traveling the globe, signing MOUs, agreements to facilitate trade. That's why we're here right now. We want to find the investors that will attract dollars into our products, the projects that we have in Northern Ontario. And we all think we've got the best ones. And nothing wrong with that. Because, as I said, there's no competition, because every one of them is certainly scarce. But there's another thing that's happening that's independent of the governments. Again, when I was with Americas, we had a great lithium project in Argentina. We thought it would be a natural to have Tesla to invest downstream into right into the project. They didn't. That really surprised us, as a matter of fact. And consequently, we ended up buying Thacker Pass in the U.S. But having said that, since that time, it's been standard for the companies, both auto companies, refineries, to vertically integrate and put money back right into the deposits. So of course, they saw the shortages, and the markets really weren't aware or awake to as they are now. I mean, I've been going to this for a few years. I think this is the best attendance that we've had. Now the markets are aware, the governments are aware, they realize this is the critical part of critical minerals.
And what about mobilising that capital? I mean, for example, I also help advise Appian Capital Advisory, who've just come up with a innovative initiative with the AFC of the World Bank as a new way of mobilising money and also ensuring it is quickly and very effectively deployed. But how can we encourage more investors in this space to build partnerships, to build links, to interface both with governments, but also with what the needs are on the ground in the particular countries?
I'm going to go straight to an offtake agreement. I think these are really fantastic ways of ensuring that projects attract the investment that they need. I think governments have a significant role to play in being able to establish some of that offtake process. For instance, in Western Australia in the 1970s, to establish the gas industry, there's two really big public policy pieces that government initiate. One is a piece of common use infrastructure, which is the Dampier to Bunbury pipeline. And just for context, I'm still coming to terms with how to talk in yards and miles, but in kilometres, that's about 660 kilometres worth of inland pipe to enable where the gas comes on shore for the gas to get into the domestic market and to be exported. But also, really critically, it put in place a 10-year offtake agreement, use or lose, for a proportion of that gas at a fixed price. So that really enabled the underpinning of that investment for those investors into that project, because there was that element of certainty, and obviously then the market and the capacity for production and efficiency created a broader, bigger industry that you have today.
I think in addition to offtake agreements, which is a critical component to all of this, it's really, as a government, ensuring that we can mitigate and hopefully remove the roadblocks as it relates to developing that particular mine. And I think with that type of an approach, it gives us some confidence to investors ultimately.
Sovereign funds. You touched on it, but sovereign funds. There's a couple ways to do this. Of course, Quebec does a great job mobilizing their pension fund and have done for a lot of years. Ontario has started up a sovereign fund, if you want to call Ontario a sovereign nation, but it is that type of vehicle that's being used. You certainly see those mobilized in the Middle East. A lot of the funds that are driving the Middle East right now is to attract value-added industries into those countries. But having said that, there's trillions of dollars of funds that are looking for big projects around the globe. And so we've gone from 0 to 100 miles an hour in about 3 years, looking for these and developing these, and they're mammoth projects.
If I can add, I would say that we need also to support and help the development of all the supply chain, not just the mining project, and make sure that we have offtake agreement, that we can help with processing, just to make sure that everything goes well. And we have to work together between different government departments, just to make sure that we have a clear vision of where we are going, and all the chain is in place and effective.
And we learned that during COVID, didn't we? Supply chains.
Yeah.
If there wasn't really any silver lining to COVID, but if there was, we realized how weak or tenuous our supply chain was, because we couldn't get chips out of Taiwan, China, generally speaking. And our industry, our supply chain froze in a heartbeat. You couldn't get a vehicle. If you wanted to buy a vehicle, it was taken 24 months. And we realized how fragile that supply chain was. And that's why we're awake right now about the urgency of critical minerals and rare earths. Yeah. The supply chain is so frail.
And also, perhaps what we also learned from the tragedy of the pandemic was the importance of a cross-government approach. That the issues we're talking about, they're not just the responsibility of the mining ministry or the mining lead in a state or a country. It's very much about that integration across government, the interface with the industry, the interface with business, with finance, and also crucially with communities.
We also learned that we could make a decision really quickly and enact it and get it out on the ground. So we can make this happen fast if we put our minds to it.
Right. But you talk about, the musings of, tariffs in China of 147% or 150%, that really shook the bond market. It's like they forgot about liquidity ratios. And the bond market drives the global economic order. And that's really what's at stake right now, as much as it was in 2008.
Just before we turn to questions from the audience, I just want to pick up one final theme that we touched on at the start, which is actually about skills and people. And the sort of problems, sorts of issues we're talking about, and also actually a vision of the future, which I think is quite exciting. But from each of you, what are your messages to attract people to work in this sector or on some of these broader issues?
Well, I certainly think from New Brunswick's perspective, again, we are really emphasizing the importance of this sector, that it's an emerging or a revised sector in the province with a lot of opportunity for young people. The one thing that we actually find in New Brunswick is the fact we already have trained individuals, but it's a fly in, fly out sort of scenario. People are traveling to other jurisdictions to practice their skill or their trade, and there's really opportunity to bring those folks home. We're also working very closely with our educational institutions, so our universities, as well as our colleges. And we know that they have programs and hope that those programs grow in size with time.
Yeah, training. I mean, really and truly repeating exactly what we were talking about with the college system and university systems. Working with the Ontario Mining Association, and across Canada, the Mining Association of Canada, with the same themes, with programs that are intertwined with the education about mining back into high schools and elementary schools. Absolutely essential. On the company side of things, automation. We've got haulage fleets, and everybody knows this. I mean, they're huge trucks, and it's a little bit stunning to see them emerge out of an open pit, no drivers. So you can take the human or the equation from the point of view of a pressure point from labor. We do.
I think it's, we've always attracted the brightest and best, and we need to continue to encourage the brightest and the join us at a time when it's more complex than ever, and also that the opportunities are more rewarding and more exciting than ever. And really, to pick up on the Minister's point, the automation that's occurred within industry is incredible. The acceleration of the technologies on site, the safety systems, the sensors, they're really leading the way in workforce safety and security. And the new skills in computing, in the traditions of geography and in geoscience, but also how they can apply to mine management and how they can apply to environmental outcomes. There are just so many different professions that have a very important role to play within our industry, and being able to showcase to a new generation who grew up on Minecraft. Like, how cool is that? Like, we literally get to do that in real life all the time. But also to be able to put in place how different the sector is and how much they have shaped that.
Yeah, a lot has been said. Even though it's an old sector, an old economic sector, I think we want to sell it as also part of the economy of the future. So there's a lot of innovation, AI, the practice has changed. It's more environmental, sustainable, as it was, let's say, 20 years ago. And we try to present it as good job, good opportunities, and part of the future. So there's a lot of attraction. Everyone is working together, government, school, university, enterprise, and it's been successful.
And that's certainly why I got involved. It's about the future of the world. What could be more exciting than that? But in our closing minutes, do we have any questions from the audience? Gentleman there. And can you just introduce yourself as well, please?
Much for an insightful discussion. I have a question for the Honourable Minister. In the context of the G7 critical minerals, do you envisage the role of the Global South and Africa in particular, its contribution in advancing the objectives contemplated in the G7 action plan? Thank you very much.
An important question. Minister,
is that for me? Look, obviously, there's huge storage of wealth in the southern continents, the southern, the particular term used with the
Global South.
Global South, obviously. And again, I've worked in most of the areas you're talking about, including South Africa, well endowed with critical minerals and rare earths, have a huge part of the future. And as I said, there's no competition vis-a-vis the fact that it's going to be difficult to produce all the commodities that are going to be required in the next 5, 10, 15 years. And large of them are going to come from the Global South.
Thank you. Any further questions? Gentleman there.
Hi. Oops. Can you hear me? Yeah, thanks very much. Tim Pirie, advisor in extractives, coming from Sweden, but more recently working in Serbia. And I'm interested in the Minister's comment on the duty to consult. I'm well aware of Canada's leadership in that regard. We've seen lots and lots of mining projects that don't have a durable social license to operate. Lots of money has been wiped off the balance sheet. Lots of supply has been wiped off the global availability. So I'm wondering how Canada is using this duty to consult in the context of collaboration as a competitive advantage. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, I don't need a mic. Obviously, I think Canada's got a leg up. I think the world globally is largely aware of their responsibility to Indigenous communities, and the duty to consult is enshrined in our Constitution. Not every Indigenous community is at the same place with capacity, and building capacity is the number one thing that you have to do within a government, and working with the companies that have the resources in their backyard. I served on Waugashing Resources Incorporated. That was a commercial entity that was owned by Waugashing First Nation. That's a small community on the south of Lake Abitibi. And it was there to capitalize on the resources that they held in their traditional territory. And it's a simple matter of dialogue, consultation with the resource holders, if you will, or those that have the ability to extract those resources, to ensure that there is a fair deal. During the summer, I travel all the time, but during the summer we were in northern Ontario, Fort Albany, a couple times. We're advocating for a port in James Bay, anchored with an LNG facility. All they want, of course, they want a fair share. They want to be treated like true partners. And there's a real lesson here that everybody has to understand. Trust is the hardest thing to achieve. It's the easiest thing to lose. So you must keep your word. You must keep your word when you're developing these agreements. It is the future.
And can I add in an Australian thank you, Fiona? I appreciate that. Just also in an Australian context, we've had a very strong relation with First Nations for a long time. It would be great to be able to also take the time to have a look at particularly the relationships that we have with business for First Nations, being able to have equity shares in some of the ongoing support services to our mining industry. The proportion of Aboriginal people working for industry has grown and grown year on year, with focused efforts from governments to ensure that engagement and that involvement and that ongoing partnership process.
So those principles of building trust, building partnership, building joint involvement right from the start, applies both with local communities and Indigenous peoples, but also I think applies very much across the changing dynamics of relations with the Global South and the future, indeed, as our world goes forward. Well, we're out of time, so thank you very much to our audience, but particularly thanks to our panellists for their time during this very busy week. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to our panellists. If I can please invite